Lynn Onstot. I'm with Joplin Insider. It's a show designed to tell you a little bit more about what goes on in the city of Joplin. Today my guest is Taylor Cunningham. Taylor is a planner for the city of Joplin and has been with the city for a little bit over 2 years. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm always excited to get people on here that I haven't had a chance to talk with very much, even in the office. So I know I'm going to learn a lot about you personally as well as your job. In planning, you have a lot of experience with property zoning and proper use of land, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and there's a lot of requirements about residence and business regulations and zonings. So we're going to go over a little bit of that, and as well as historic preservation, comprehensive plans, those kind of things. Things that maybe as a resident you may not know that much about, but you've heard the terms and you're like, what does that entail? Well, we're going to tell you a little bit more about that. So maybe overall, can you just provide a description about planning in general?
Sure, yeah. So planning is kind of the beginning. So we see a lot of project delivery. So planning is kind of the beginning before all of that a lot of residents and citizens don't see. So if you think of like a new development in Joplin, let's say Chili's, because that was pretty popular or unpopular.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even before that can be built, there's a ton of work that goes into it in rezoning properties so that it's appropriate for commercial uses, in reviewing construction plans, making sure there's proper design and facades, all of that. So planning is really what goes into everything before you actually see it. And even before that, planning is a tool to sort of set a vision for a city, how it needs to be developed, what's appropriate for development, and really it's tailored to each individual city. So planning isn't the same anywhere, but it's really all the unseen work that happens before residents or the general public gets to see much at all.
So it's the pre-work, you know, to develop our city. So the way, Joplin is, established, obviously we have the east-west corridors, your numbered streets, 4th, 7th, 20th, those kind of 32nd. But of course, Range Line, Main Street, Connecticut. So actually there's rhyme and reason about how those develop?
Yeah, definitely, especially after the tornado. In 2012, Joplin adopted their comprehensive plan before I even started working here, that really set a general vision for how they wanted the city to redevelop. The tornado was very tragic and all of that, but they saw it as an opportunity that now that there's going to be all this fresh redevelopment, how do we really want this to play out? What do we want the city to look like when this is all done? We don't want to just let things happen. We want it to be planned because when you plan for economic development, when you plan for parks, street expansion, bike and pedestrian facilities, you can really lay it all out and see how you'll be successful and where you want to go and kind of set the rules for how you get there.
Okay. So you mentioned a comprehensive plan. I know the city's had comprehensive plans in the past.
Right.
So they've been established. But in 2012, that was kind of
a big one.
A big one. They looked at that and said, okay, now let's look. Obviously, 20th and Main Street were the main corridors affected, and 26th Street.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit of what changed?
Yeah, sure. So planning, even though it's been around since people first settled in America, it's always changing, new theories, new ideas of what best practices are. It's constantly evolving, and cities are constantly evolving, especially when there's something like a natural disaster like what we saw. And so the comprehensive plan has to be updated to keep up with all of the new things we're learning, what's going on in the city, how everything's changing. So our comprehensive plan basically was looking at a city with, 3/4 of a mile wide empty strip all the way through.
Right.
And it's kind of like we look at this and say, where do we go from here? And so you mentioned 20th Street, 26th Street, Main Street, some South Range Line. Those were the big corridors that really got impacted. And what the city did in conjunction with all of the CART team and all that redevelopment was say, these corridors are really important and we want them to develop in an ethical way, in a beautiful way, in a way that really fosters development for the city and creates a better place for people to live. And so part of what that did was create these planned development corridors along 26th Street, 20th Street, Main Street, and South Range Line that said any buildings that are constructed we're imposing more stringent standards because we want this to be really beautifully done. We don't want metal buildings thrown up. We want, lots of trees. We want sidewalk access. So one thing it did was designate those 4 major corridors and say, we're holding these to higher standards. So it developed design guidelines for those 4 major corridors that we still use, 4 years later, and that kind of all the architects and engineers in town are getting really familiar with. So that was one of the big things. Another thing was an emphasis on greener development and more connectivity with trails and bicycles and sidewalks and stuff like that. So it was really just kind of about creating a renewed vision for what Joplin was going to look like once this was all said and done.
Okay, and when you're saying we, obviously there was the CART, which is the Citizens Advisory Recovery Team, that the citizens came together and said what, kind of prioritize what they want.
Right.
They presented the plan. I mean, there was a group of 5 different organizations I know approved that plan, including the council. And then from there, the planners got involved and said, okay, let's develop a plan that incorporates some of this. And then did you have to take that back to council as well?
Yeah, it was approved by the council in 2012. So, I mean, I'm sure it was worked on even in 2011, but that date's kind of the stamp of approval when council said, yes, this is what we want.
Right. So people obviously had a chance to weigh in their ideas.
Yeah. Really, the whole planning department operates under a really, there's a huge emphasis on public involvement because, we're creating documents and sometimes policies or regulations that guide what the city is going to look like. And the most important thing is that is what the people who actually live here want it to look like and function and how everything flows. So yeah, there was a huge public involvement process.
So this comprehensive plan, does it sit somewhere that somebody can go look at?
Oh yeah, it's on. There are copies on the website. There's a copy, a PDF. I have a hard copy that is in a big binder that's falling out because we use it every day. But yeah, it's if you go to the Planning, Development, Neighborhood Services on the city website, you can find it there.
Okay, I don't know if we're able to call that up now. That's kind of an area on our website. It's under departments, I believe. There's the planning and development. It tells a little bit about what you do.
Yeah.
But I don't know how. Yeah, there's the comprehensive long-term planning. That tells a little bit for the residents what you do. I know that's kind of a PowerPoint found in there talking about zoning and land use. We'll talk about that. So do citizens, they can come in and say, I need to see the comprehensive plan. Why would somebody want to do that?
We've had, one thing is, we've had citizens or developers or people say, hey, I'd like to invest in this piece of property to build a house, to build a business, something like that, without knowing what the long-term vision is for that area of town, without knowing the requirements that might be on that piece of land because of where it is. So that's one reason. Another reason, the first day I started this job, which was December 15th of 2014, I guess. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
But I sat at my desk and read the comprehensive plan, basically. And I had just moved to Joplin. I didn't really know what the city as an institution was about. But that plan excited me to work there and made me feel like it was a place I wanted to be because I said, this is forward thinking. This is not just, hey, let's get through the next day. This is, we have a long-term vision for the next 20, 30 years. So I think it's important for citizens just to know what the city wants and how this public involvement process, what people have said they wanted and what the city hopefully will look like in the future.
Right. And like you said, they could either go in and if they want, be ambitious and read the whole plan.
Yeah, sure.
Or they
there
can
are
pick
sections.
Out, sections. Or again, like you said, that property, if they're going to buy property maybe on, I'm going to say South Connecticut, and they're going to say, okay, what's going to happen to South Connecticut in the next 5 years, the next 10 years?
Yeah, and one of the things that we did during the comprehensive plan update, I say we, even though I wasn't there, it's kind of how we use it, but is designate future land uses for areas. So a lot might be zoned for a single family residential home, let's say around 20th and Rangeline, between Rangeline and Highview. Our future land use map says that in the future, that whole block is really going to be commercial.
Okay.
It's going to, go
Eventually.
through. Yeah. So if they wanted to get it rezoned to commercial, even though you think single family to high intensity commercial use, that doesn't seem, that seems a
Possible.
little far-fetched.
Right.
But our future land use map designates it at that. At the same time, if someone buys a piece of property, let's say in my neighborhood or something, and they want to build a gas station and they want to rezone it, they can sure apply, but the regulation governing us is the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. So if that piece of property is designated in the future as residential, we're not going to recommend that it be rezoned.
Right.
Because that was the input that we got from citizens and from experts and professionals, that this is kind of how we want the city to evolve, but it's also to protect the rights of property owners, that they know going into it what that could be in the future, what that will say in the present.
So if somebody does come into your neighborhood and is buying property, I know obviously by attending council meetings, I
Right.
know that often we have public hearings. So tell the public a little bit about how does that work? How does someone who buys a property want to rezone? What do they have to do, and how does that all work?
Yeah. The first thing that happens is they usually call me or call someone who transfers them to me.
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah. And you have to submit an application for rezoning, to get a special use permit, anything like that. And it's usually a 2 to 3 month process from start to finish. It costs $450 right now is what our application fee is. So it's not an easy task by any means. And what happens is they submit their application, and that's when it triggers our staff to start reviewing it. So it's reviewed by planning and zoning, engineering, transportation engineers, communications even reviews some of them, the fire department, to make sure, okay, this is going to be safe. This is in accordance with what things that are planned out in the future. So that is happening before there's ever a public hearing.
Okay.
And usually I have a meeting with people before they even submit an application to just say, hey, this is probably not feasible, because I don't want to waste anyone's time or money or
Right.
my own time.
Right.
Then the first meeting that they'll go to is a planning and zoning meeting. And that's a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Those meetings are on the second Monday of every month at 4 o'clock on the fifth
Everyone's
floor.
welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyone's
It's a
welcome.
public meeting, right.
On the fifth floor of City Hall. And the Planning and Zoning Commission basically hears the case. They take the staff report and all the support materials I've given and prepared to them. And they make a recommendation to the city council of whether or not they think this should be approved. They don't make any final decisions.
Right.
But we'll read the case, it'll be presented by the developer, property owner, whomever. They'll ask if anyone wants to speak in favor and if anyone wants to speak in opposition, and anyone is welcome to speak and say, their opinions, and get their questions answered by staff. Then after that, it goes to the next month's city council meeting for denial or approval. And it's the same sort of format. I present the case, we hear any support and opposition, and then the council makes a decision.
Okay, and then from there on, it can go or not go.
Right.
Well, and I know in some cases, like you said, a gas station.
Right.
Obviously, if a gas station's trying to go into a residential
Right.
area, obviously you're probably going to be wise and say,
Yeah.
let's not waste your
Right.
time and money.
Right.
But, sometimes when they're on the fringe, I know that we'll have a large
Yep.
group of people that
Yes.
say, and they've done what they call a plan development, a
Yeah.
PD, or, they talk about the buffer zone.
Right.
What does that mean?
So I'll talk first about the buffer zone
Okay.
because it's in our code right now. If there's a commercial property that's right next to a residential property, we require them to put in some sort of screening or buffer to protect that neighbor from any noise, any visual, and protect their property values. So that's a requirement no matter what. If you have a commercial and a residential property sitting side by side, that's always a requirement. A planned development PD district is sort of an overlay designation we would put on top of a piece of property that allows the city council to make additional requirements. So
Okay.
if a property was rezoned to commercial, any of the intensities of commercial, there are certain regulations they have to follow that are just in our zoning ordinance. If the council wanted to make an additional requirement that's above and beyond our zoning ordinance, they couldn't just do that. They would have to have a planned development district. let's say the residents said that they wanted a certain type of fencing or wall between that property. If that's not already required in our code, that's something that council has to choose to require on top of that. It's not what our department originally required, but the council is the one who has the power to do that.
Okay. Well, like for instance, we talked about Chili's. I know there was some some concern. I believe it was 14th Street. You know that what they call egress and ingress, the way that people were going to enter into Chili's.
Right.
That they were really concerned that they're going to be using 14th Street as a roadway, right in. And so the city council, I guess was it the council that said, okay, let's put a stop
a barrier.
A barrier.
Yeah.
So,
the council decided that they required the developer to pay to have the street shut down, basically, and it was vacated. So it's not a public street, and basically that's so people couldn't turn off of range line. They wouldn't be driving. Oh, they could only enter off of range line. They couldn't drive up 14th Street and go through the neighborhood. Right. Because that would have increased traffic.
Yeah, because obviously you're in the neighborhood and you want residential neighborhood activities, not commercial activities.
Yeah, and that's when it gets a little blurry and it's tough because you always want to be friendly to new businesses coming in.
And respect your residents that are already here.
And it's, we're always trying to kind of please everybody, and it's tough sometimes.
Right. But again, the residents have that opportunity
to come and speak.
Right. Well, when there is a property that's going to be in question, I've noticed the signs. And so I want to make sure everybody aware that you guys post signs, right?
We post signs at the property, usually before the planning and zoning meeting, way before, over a month before the city council meeting. Another thing we're required by state statute to do is send a letter out to every property owner within 185 feet.
Okay.
So that
is
they're
that a
notified.
Typical lot size? I don't know.
That's just a state statute, not necessarily lot size. But they can sign a notarized protest petition, and if we get over 50% of the area within that 185 feet buffer, if over half of those people turn in a petition, it has to be approved by a supermajority by the council, so 2/3.
Okay.
And so that's just, again, to give residents opportunity to have on the record that they don't want this development or they want certain requirements attached to it, something like that.
So again, protecting the residents.
Yes.
And that's awesome.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
Is good. Well, I know, I could talk all day about zoning and comprehensive plans, but I know there's a lot of different things that you do. Before we go, though, into the other subject, different codes, R1, R2.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So we have three big kind of classes of zoning. Residential, which they always start with R, commercial, which always starts with C, and industrial, which always starts with M. I'm not sure why, that's just how it is. And within those classes, there are different intensities. So an R1 would be like a single family lot, just its own individual house on separate lots. R2 is for two-family residential, like duplexes, stuff like that.
Okay.
R3 is for multifamily, so apartments, triplexes, quadplexes. We do have an R4. It's not used as much, but it's for townhomes. So basically row homes, but that are sold off and have individual property owners, not rental. Commercial is similar. We have a CO, which is like, it's non-retail commercial. So a lot of West 32nd Street is CO, where there are lots of doctors. It's office space, basically, but not retail. So the hours aren't as long. There's not as much traffic generally. C1 is neighborhood commercial, so smaller scale commercial, like you would see on some of there are arterial streets, but not on range line, the big box, not any of the big box stuff. C2 is for central business district. That's like downtown. There are less setbacks required, so they can build right up to the property line. If you walk along downtown, stuff's right up next to the sidewalk for the downtown feel. And so that's what that is. And then C3 is like that high intensity commercial use, like Walmart or big box stuff that has lots of traffic, might be open longer hours, have more noise, stuff like that. Yeah, more light. And then we have light industrial and heavy industrial.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's pretty interesting. So, and again, people can always look at our website and check that out if they're interested in the zoning, of course, or contact you.
And contact me if you want to know zoning on a certain piece of property. I can definitely get you that information.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at my notes, and I know we talked a little bit about getting in and out of neighborhoods, and that's transportation.
Yeah.
So there's a term called JATSO that you work with.
Yeah.
Tell me about JATSO, what it is, and what does that mean, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, JATSO, J-A-T-S-O, it stands for the Joplin Area Transportation Study Organization.
Okay.
JATSO was formed a couple decades ago in the 80s, I believe. Basically, the federal government has said that any area with a population of over 50,000 people, any urbanized area at the census with over 50,000, you have to have what's called a Metropolitan Planning Organization, an MPO. And that's what JATSO is. It's a transportation planning policy board, basically, that makes decisions about transportation planning in Joplin.
And the surrounding area?
And the surrounding area. So I think we gave a map that shows, but our urbanized area isn't only Joplin. It includes Carl Junction, Webb City, Oronogo, goes down to Loma Linda, and that's what the urbanized area is. So our urbanized, even though Joplin's population is just a little over 50,000, our urbanized area is over 80,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so
they called up the website. So again, that's another division of your website. Just, so they could go in and look at the big map. And
and if you see, there's the Metropolitan Transportation Planning 101 on the side panel. That kind of tells you just what transportation planning is, why it's formed, and then our various, they're called work products, so different plans we have. We have like a yearly budget, which is the Unified Planning Work Program. It's just what we're going to do for the next calendar or fiscal year. We have a Transportation Improvement Program, which covers 4 years. And that's really the project-specific information. So if you wanted to know what projects were programmed for the next 4 years, like maybe a road expansion or new sidewalk somewhere, that's in the TIP, the TIP.
Okay.
And then we have a 20-year planning document, which is the long range, the stuff I like doing.
Yeah.
20-year transportation planning. It's a lot like a comprehensive plan, but for transportation exclusively. Kind of where do we want the system to go? What are our goals and objectives, and how are we going to meet those? And we just finished updating that in March. It was adopted.
Okay. Well, and when you start talking about transportation, you're not just talking about cars. You're talking about bicycles, pedestrians.
Yeah.
So trails. Didn't you do a recent study about bicycles and trails?
We just programmed into this year's UPWP. We're going to be updating the bike and pedestrian transportation plan. That's going to have a pretty big public involvement process as well. So you might kind of watch for news releases and advertisements for public meetings. But when we updated the long range plan, what we really heard a lot from residents was they wanted more emphasis on the bicycle and pedestrian transportation system, on sidewalk connectivity, bike lanes, and safety. And so that's what we decided to focus on. That's what we heard from everyone. So,
well, and that's good, because I know just recently the Tiger Grant. We just went through the final 5 projects of the Tiger Grant, and all of those widening projects had bicycle paths.
Yeah. So something kind of a big buzzword in transportation right now is complete streets, which basically means a street that is built for all users of transportation.
Okay.
So you'll see a lot of our new streets have bike paths, ADA accessible sidewalks.
That's really important.
Yeah, because we recognize that the transportation system isn't just for cars, that cities are for people, and for people to move around, and we want them to be able to do that safely, and we want everyone to be able to do that, no matter their mobility.
Well, I know 20th Street and Main Street are on the docket for the disaster recovery funds.
Right.
And I can't remember which one goes first, but
I can't either. I get mixed up.
I know, I get mixed up, but 20th Street, and I know I've been in part of those meetings, as you have, that those are going to be complete streets, that they're going to look at those. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think so too. And the federal government's focusing more on it. We're hearing more from residents who have different mobility needs, that they want to be a part of things, but our mobility is kind of our freedom to move and go do whatever we want. You and I both got in cars and drove here, and that's not for everyone. Can't do that.
Right.
So the more diverse your transportation system is, the more people you're able to serve, which that's always the goal.
And then you can attract to your community. Your community grows.
Definitely. It's a huge thing that even businesses who are coming in look at what your transportation system looks like.
Well, and then of course the trolley was added several years ago, and that seems to be very popular.
Oh, so popular. We get requests for new stops and extended hours all the time, and that's just a matter of needing more funds and more people, and that's tough to do anywhere for any kind of business now.
Right. So I'm looking down my tick list, and then historical preservation.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going through I know this job is very intense. You do a lot of things, but historic preservation is another one.
Yeah.
And so recently you just finished a preservation plan, is that right?
Yes, we updated, which hadn't been updated since 1991.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's kind of crazy. And people are like, what do you need to update it for? It's historic preservation. But
well, that's a good point.
Right. So, but that was something we wanted to really communicate to people, was that our idea of preservation, we wanted to make it much more holistic. Because Joplin has a really incredible story to tell. And so we wanted that preservation and our preservation focus to be about communicating our city's character, telling our shared story. And so that we're looking at historic preservation in a way that includes our downtown buildings, but also includes the new high school and everything that's been built since the tornado, because that's our history.
Okay.
And it's so important, even if it's not 50 years old or 100 years old. And we really focused on the downtown, our historic commercial corridors like Broadway and 7th Street, and then our neighborhoods. So it was a much more rounded look at what preservation can be. And it's great too. It's on the website. Just got approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. And it's a really great document, even just to learn a little bit about the history of Joplin that not everyone knows. It's really cool.
And that's on the website
cool
again.
To read through. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going through the website preparing for this program, and I realized there are a lot of documents out there that I haven't even
tons of plans.
read the whole thing. Now,
planners love documents.
Yes, well, because you're looking back.
Yeah.
Because history kind of repeats itself, but yet you guys are
totally.
going forward.
We can learn so much from it, though.
Well, no, on the preservation plan, it still needs to. I mean, council has heard about it, or heard it, so to speak. It's been reported.
We had a work session,
right? But it has not been approved.
Right. It will. Yeah. It will. Well, once we get their stamp of approval, hopefully in the next month, then the project will be totally complete.
Okay. And so what will you do with the preservation plan? What happens with that?
It will be used as sort of a guiding document to make decisions of setting goals for the Historic Preservation Commission, guiding how we make decisions even in planning and zoning. It's really building on the comprehensive plan and filling in some of the gaps that we didn't focus on after the tornado.
Like, how does a historical building get used and refurbished and things of that nature. So, well, again, the website has a lot of information about this. I think we just blew through your job. I know. But there's a lot of different things that are on the website, as well as in talking with you. I think citizens would really benefit from that. If they have any questions about zoning, or if they're looking at buying property, come look at the comprehensive plan. That's one thing I learned. I've learned a lot at the city, but that was one of the things I was like, wow, you guys actually plan for the city?
I know, it's crazy. People think we don't, but
but when you look at it, there is a plan.
And you can see how it's been playing out.
It's the big game of life.
Definitely.
Right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, Taylor, I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
You. I also want to thank our viewers for joining us today. If you have ideas for future programs, please contact me at the City of Joplin. Thank you. I'm Lynn Onstot.